So I've reached age 33, which means I've outlived two of the people who most influenced me, Christ and Alexander the Great. And it creates an interesting opportunity where I can reflect and try to come to some wisdom. Reaching your 30s is a transition. I only registered it recently when I was watching the news and saw how the media was covering Generation Z, graduating and entering the workforce. It was being covered in the same way that millennials had been before, which caused me to realize the cynicism of it. I realized it's not motivated by a particular sociological interest, but that it's just the product of one news cycle moving into another. It's just a mechanical process, the rising of a new generation, without a deeper meaning or significance. In your 30s, you diminish as an individual. There's an expectation that you work and fit in, that you grow out of childhood, and you leave your uniqueness as a young person behind. Millennials grew up with this dynamic energy in the 90s, this sense of the infinite potential of the future. And it's interesting to see its outcome in our time. There's a song by The Offspring that I think gets at this, at the material reality of life. Having said that, I'd like to unpack some of the life lessons I've learned to try to impart my experience to others. 1. Don't wait for karma to rebalance your life. So I think if you're pious or theologically oriented, this is one of the mistakes you can fall into. There's a temptation to think that there's this justice in life, that some benign force is looking after us, and if you just wait, then the moral arbiter of the universe will make sure that you're vindicated and you'll get what you deserve. If you embrace this and live in faith, it's a very beautiful way of looking at the world, but it's going to make you too passive. You'll end up waiting for things to happen to you rather than working to make them happen on your own. If you've experienced injustice, you don't want to dwell in resentment. You have to move forward and make your own justice, which means establishing fulfillment and wellness in your own life, independent of the experiences of others. 2. Value friendships and relationships. Aristotle said man is a social animal, and the evidence shows this is correct. If you have a circle of good friends, you'll feel greater wellness, self-worth, and intellectual engagement. You'll have more opportunities personally and romantically, and you'll even stave off the effects of cognitive decline. Statistically, we all become more isolated with age, choosing to spend more time alone. The further you get from high school and college, the more your relationships deteriorate. Men also suffer from this significantly, losing many of their social networks in their 30s, making them increasingly dependent on their partners for support. I think using social media wisely can help with this. We shouldn't use social media as a life comparison tool, as doing that only hurts us. We should use it to keep in touch with a small circle of people over the long term. Sociologically, there's something called the Dunbar number, which is the maximum number of acquaintances you can have. Smaller than that is the number of intimate friendships you can have, which is somewhere, due to the time investment, between 3 and 7. This suggests we should value a small number of quality friends, and we should try to develop intimate relationships with them over the long term. 3. A real friend is there for you. You can tell a friend because they're there for you when times are bad. And unfortunately, one of the things you may find is that when you're in some of your worst periods, you may find yourself alone or with very few friends. Inversely, you want to be there for others when they fall into difficulty and not abandon them when you're most needed. 4. Is it better to be an introvert or an extrovert? So this is one I want to try to examine both sides of. If you use the Myers-Briggs personalities, the population is divided about 50-50 between introverts and extroverts, which means from an evolutionary perspective, there's social value in both of them. The value of introversion is you tend to develop very detailed, in-depth interests. When you speak to an introvert, if you can get them to be open, they often have a lot to share and can connect with you in an intimate way. At the same time, the weakness of introversion is you don't put yourself out in the social universe, so you don't get any value or recognition for your interests. There are some cultures, like South Korea and Finland, that value introverts more, but in the normative American culture, you need to be an extrovert. Extroversion puts you into social relations with others and creates value. So if you're an introvert, you want to challenge yourself to be sociable and share yourself with others. And if you're an extrovert, you want to take time alone to cultivate yourself and your personality. 5. Be true to yourself. I think people tend to look at their idiosyncrasies, like their voice or hair color or other traits, and find ways to be ashamed of themselves. A man might feel insecure about his voice or height, or a woman may take issue with something about her appearance. What you don't realize is the same traits that you feel are shortcomings for you may be things that other people envy about you. If you accept yourself, then you'll see your idiosyncrasies are part of what define you and make you unique, and you'll be able to embrace them and be comfortable with who you are. 6. Don't internalize rejection. This is a hard one, and one of the things that can happen is if you're unlucky and experience rejection early, it can damage you and cause you to socially withdraw. People in life will either like you or dislike you, and if they don't like you, move on and try not to dwell on it. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. Instead, spend time with the people who do like you and accept you for who you are. 7. You can only move forward. Life is filled with the errors and mistakes we make. There are things all of us should have done sooner, moralities or belief systems we should have updated before. You can't undo the past, but you can learn from it, forgive yourself, and move on. When you reach your 30s, you start to look at time and realize that every choice you make has an opportunity cost. So your response to this is you can start today. You can change today and pursue what you want today. 8. Listen. One of the challenges of life is how vast the world is and how many things there are to learn. At 18, if you go to college, you have to pick a major and select a path that you'll commit your life to. But to quote Pontius Pilate, what is truth? What is the highest thing you can devote yourself to? Should you focus on money? Should you try to be social? Should you study economics, physics, or politics? Or is there some hidden truth to religion? Is there some mystery hidden in the human condition for us to explore? We all enter the world as blank canvases and have to rely on the teachers we're exposed to guide us. I'd love to go back a decade ago with the knowledge I have now. As with my experience now, I would have made all different choices. But the process of learning happens through experience, and that takes time to cultivate. 9. Speak. While it's important to give the cake time to cook, time to develop your identity and sense of self, you don't want to spend forever in this process. Eventually, you want to make the effort to share your light with the world. As we said, you should embrace your uniqueness and not be afraid to put your experience before the world. 10. Strive for self-awareness. Self-awareness is one of the most important virtues. It means to take responsibility for yourself and learn from experience. It means to be aware of how you're perceived by other people and have social intelligence. It means to be aware of your shortcomings and grow from them. Self-awareness is essential to be able to gain wisdom. In theory, if you're more self-aware, then you'll learn from your negative experiences more quickly and not repeat them. There's an internet figure who endlessly fascinates people called Christian, who has a documentary on him that's gone on for more than 70 episodes. If you try to understand what makes Christian so fascinating, it has to do with self-awareness. Christian has this unique psychology where he isn't self-aware. He doesn't learn from experience and never takes responsibility for himself. When you observe his life, it teaches you what happens if you live by these principles. So the lesson is, don't be Christian. 11. The more things change, the more they stay the same. I studied the French and Russian revolutions, and this is one of the cynical lessons that I think you get from them. Human beings have this great spirit within them, where in harsh times we wish we could just overthrow everything wrong with the human condition and produce a new creation. It takes very extreme circumstances for a culture to do this, but we've done it twice in history. And the unfortunate conclusion is that when you have these types of transformations, things often get worse instead of better. George Orwell, who was a democratic socialist, wrote a book called Animal Farm on this lesson. The book is an allegory for the Russian Revolution, and its whole purpose is to communicate the irony of history. In the book, a group of animals on a farm are tired of living under the tyranny of a cruel farmer. So they organize, stage a revolution, and take over the farm. They then choose the most responsible of them, the pig, to be in charge. For a short time they think they're free, but then the pig they put in charge slowly becomes more tyrannical, and eventually recreates the same system that they previously had. Throughout the book, there's the character of the donkey, likely a symbol of Orwell himself, who always goes on about how long he's been alive. He's suggesting there are these hard rails of history, and while we can aspire for something higher or nobler, at the end of the day, our improvements have to be in the real world. 12. If you want to change the world, start by getting a mirror. While you can't control other people, how they think or behave, the one thing you can change is yourself. You can reform your own conduct and how you treat others to be the change you want to see in the world.